China's ambassador to the U.S. has met with the acting U.S. Secretary of State John Sullivan to seek a way out of the threat of an all-out trade war. But why is China so strongly opposed to the so-called 301 section investigation? And for only the second time in the past half a century, a Chinese American is running for the post of the U.S. president. We'll be talking to him in person and finding out what is it that drives such an ambition. Welcome to The Point, live from Beijing. I'm Li Xin. China's ambassador to the U.S. met with acting U.S. Secretary of State John Sullivan late on Wednesday to talk about the trade tensions between the world's two largest economies. The talks came after each government unveiled tit-for-tat list of products worth some $50 billion that could be subject to higher tariffs. CGTN urged Washington to abandon its unilateral and protectionist practices and terminate the Section 301 investigation into China as early as possible. He also called on the U.S. to resolve relevant differences through talks and consultative methods with the Chinese side. The U.S. State Department has said that Sullivan reiterated the need to restore fairness and balance to U.S.-China economic ties, and that he and Cui agreed to remain in close communication on these and other bilateral, regional and global issues of mutual concern. Businesses in both China and the U.S. have reiterated they hope that the delay before the tariffs are due to be implemented will allow time for both governments to reach a negotiated settlement that will prevent an escalation into a full-blown trade war. To discuss this in more detail, I'm happy to be joined in the studio by He Weiwen, a senior fellow at the Center for China and Globalization, and on the line from Cyprus by Jameel Ahmad, Global Head of Currency Strategy and Market Research at the financial investment company FXTM. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Mr. He, to you first, let's talk about the 301 investigation. Why is China so strongly opposed to this investigation?
Definitely, because very simple, it's illegal. It's only based on American domestic law. It has no jurisdiction over other countries, and it's not in compliance with the WTO rules. WTO's dispute settlement mechanism, Article 23, prohibits the use of unilateral measures. And 20 years ago, in 1998, the United States initiated a 301 investigation on the European Union, and the European Union resorted to WTO, and America lost, and the United States committed no longer to use it.
So China has ruled out the possibility, according to a joint press conference by the Ministries of Commerce and the Ministry of Commerce just yesterday, that it's not possible for China to negotiate with the United States under the framework of the 301 investigation. Why not?
Absolutely. We cannot base our talks on the basis of 301 investigation. If we do so, then we admit 301 is working, it's legal, then WTO is not important. If WTO multilateral trade mechanism is put aside, what world will be? We definitely cannot do that.
But from the meeting, from what was said in the media, the few sentences that we know about the meeting between Chinese ambassador to the United States, CGTN, and acting U.S. Secretary of State John Sullivan, what information did you get out of it? Do you think there is some kind of hope that some kind of negotiated settlement could be reached anytime soon?
I think a good sign is both sides express the same thing. We hope to talk. That's good. The bad thing is, unfortunately, there's no common ground. Our ambassador adhered that 301 must be dropped. However, Sullivan said, he didn't mention that. Of course, he will not accept that. He said, America still seeks fair trade. That's quite another meaning. So it is difficult for us to talk with the United States. There won't be an arduous task ahead.
Let me talk to Mr. Ahmad, who is joining us on the line from Cyprus. Mr. Ahmad, welcome to the show. Now, it's very interesting. After China released its list of goods that is subject to the to higher tariffs from the Chinese government, U.S. Secretary of Treasury Wilbur Ross went on TV and he said he was a little bit surprised that the market reacted negatively after China released that list. What do you make of his reaction?
I think it's certainly been a very eventful week in the financial markets, because if you look at the market reaction so far, what we've seen is volatility across one asset class, and that's mostly the stock markets, and in particular yesterday the US stock markets. So on the breaking news that China was imposing its own retaliation measures on the US, we saw US futures pointing very sharply downwards, and they opened and declined at the US Open. However, a few hours later, the US markets reversed, and all of the very small currency moves that we saw, such as dollar, Japanese yen, it declined, it then reversed its fortune. I think what this signifies is that the markets believe is that there will not be a trade war. And although it seems to be quite a negative headline, there seems to be optimism that there will be dialogue between both parties. And with dialogue, there's probably going to be a negotiation. I don't think anybody wants a trade war. We're talking about a global economy that's looking very upbeat right now, and it's the strongest global growth we've seen since the beginning of the global financial crisis. Of course, a trade war, or even this narrative over a trade war, is going to be negative for growth. It's negative for optimism over the global economy, and I don't think either side wants this. So this is possibly why the markets are reacting the way they are.
Mm-hmm. Again, my question really was about whether the Trump administration had foreseen the kind of market reaction towards what they're about to announce under the 301 investigation. I mean, before they roll out any list of any possible goods to be tariffed, shouldn't they have already known the kind of possible response from China?
I don't think it was something that was factored into considerations. All we can really talk about is the way the markets reacted. So if you go by the way the markets reacted to the retaliation methods by China, where it imposed its own sanctions on the US sanctions on imports, what it's really seen in the market was quite a reaction. So if you go by that, then yes, the US administration probably didn't think that that would have been priced in. But you never know how the financial market's going to react to something like this. It's uncertainty in the market, which is why the financial markets have reacted the way they are. However, we have not seen much movement in the currency markets or asset classes outside of the stock markets. It suggests that nobody actually believes a trade war is actually going to come.
How do you look at the kind of reported fear about the possibility that China might dump its holding of the U.S. Treasury? Do you think there is a serious worry out there? Or, again, it's just about the media?
It's a headline, and that's what it stands for right now. If you look at what might happen in the financial markets if China did do this, we'd see a significantly weaker US dollar. The US dollar's been under pressure for some time anyway, because it priced in such high premium when Donald Trump entered the White House. So the dollar's actually declined following its massive rally when Trump shocked the world by winning the election. In terms of what would happen if China did remove its treasury holdings of the United States and its dollars, then yes, the dollar would slump even further. We'd see a weaker dollar, probably a stronger currency markets elsewhere because of the dollar weakness.
Mr. He Weiwen, what do you think would be China's response? What do you think would be China's action in terms of U.S. Treasury holdings? Do you think China would resort to those kind of measures to safeguard its economic interests?
I don't think this is a good or immediate option for China, because the U.S. Treasury bonds, the bills are still something related to China's foreign exchange reserves. It's a matter of market calculation, whether it is profitable to sell it, or whether it is used to buy more. Mm-hmm. It is more or less a market action instead of any policy action.
Let's talk a little bit about the Made in China 2025 initiative. It is, according to the U.S. Trade Representative Office, the total value of imports subject to tariff increase is commensurate with an economic analysis of the harm caused by China's unreasonable technology transfer policies to the United States. And President Donald Trump has emphasized the need to protect U.S. intellectual property as the driving force behind the tariffs. Some people argue that this is more about defining who's controlling the technology of tomorrow, and that the U.S. is afraid of losing its dominant position in terms of its global leadership position in terms of technology. Mr. He, what do you think of this kind of argument?
First of all, I don't think there's any relationship between the volume of the items to be taxed, to be imposed the tariffs, $50 billion, anything to do with the 301 investigation. Because 301 investigation deals with only technology transfer and intellectual property rights. And the tariffs on $50 billion are nothing to do with that. They are products. But important enough is we must take out the focuses of that list. The checklist focuses mostly on 8 leading technologies, including the new generation of ICT, aerospace, and the numerical machine tools and robots, and energy and biotechnology and new medical devices, which fit precisely to the 10 focuses of Made in China 2025 plan. So this is the main target. It's put out explicitly by Peter Navarro. This target by Donald Trump is China's Made in China 2025. They do not allow China to grow so strongly and to compete with the United States. That's the main concern. So 301 investigation is only a tool. The real purpose is to check China.
Mr. Ahmad, how has the market reacted to this kind of implicit message that the 301 investigation is seen to be sending out?
Well, it's been pretty much how we've seen the financial market reaction over the past couple of training sessions, specifically with these trade tariffs taking over the headlines. It's quite an erratic reaction, very limited to the stock markets. It suggests that investors and financial market spectators are not looking at the broader macroeconomic picture on how the investigations or how these imposed trade tariffs might actually impact the global economy. I think that's what comes down to more so is Trump trying to appease to those who supported him. Trump's narrative's been very downbeat when it comes to China, global trade, and over a number of other things. So by imposing these tariffs and by carrying on this narrative, all he's doing is really appeasing to his supporters and showing his supporters that he is going to do what he promises. But whether there really will be tariffs or any consequences to the investigations, it remains to be clear.
And Mr. He, this question, I don't know how legitimate it is, but I have a feeling that if a government is responsible to play a constructive role in the economy, in the growth of the national economy, why can't a government help foster some sectors which are important to the growth of the country's economy?
Yeah, I think each sovereign state has its own right to grow the economy, to develop. That's the legal right. And all the leading countries, including United States, Germany, France, UK, and Japan, all have their strategies to grow the economy and technologies. So China's legal right should be protected. That's the second principle why we should be so strongly opposed to 301 investigation.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Many thanks to my two guests, He Weiwen, a senior fellow at the Center for China and Globalization, and Jameel Ahmad, Global Head of Currency Strategy and Market Research at the financial investment company FXTM. And here is my point, my personal commentary. The Trump administration's pet word is fair. Well, for any investigation to be fair, it needs to be done by a third party through due process to reach unbiased conclusions. The problem with the 301 investigation is that the U.S. wants to be its own referee while being a player at the same time. Even if some of the U.S.'s grievances may have some elements of truth, to impose tariffs on Chinese goods on the basis of a unilateral investigation is not acceptable according to the rules of the World Trade Organization, of which both the U.S. and China are members. Now, Chinese officials have called this a hegemonic move which will harm U.S.'s interests while hindering China's development. President Trump should understand to appear to bow to pressure is the last thing the Chinese government would like to be seen doing. Mutual respect needs to be a basic requirement in U.S.-China relations, not a gift. You're watching The Point with me, Lu Xin. We'll take a short break and we'll be back right after this short break. Stay with us. For the second time in history, a Chinese American is running for the U.S. president. 43-year-old Yang Anze, or Andrew Yang, is a second-generation Chinese American. After graduating from Brown University and Columbia Law School, Yang quit his job at a big law firm and began working in technology. He ran an internet startup that failed during the first dot-com bust, worked as an executive at a healthcare startup, and then helped build a business that was acquired in 2009, netting him a modest fortune. Then he started Venture for America, an organization that connects recent college graduates with startup businesses. Last year, Andrew Yang officially submitted an application to the Federal Election Committee for the U.S. presidential candidacy, becoming the second Chinese American to ever do so. In contrast to President Trump's slogan of America First, Yang is running on humanity first. So what does he mean by that? Why does he believe he has a chance in the race? I'm pleased to be joined by Andrew Yang from New York. Andrew, thank you very much for joining us. Now, you're running on the belief that automation is the biggest challenge instead of immigration or climate change or imports from China. That's your motto, humanity first. But why do you believe machines are the biggest worry for America?
Well, if you look at the numbers, automation was responsible for 80% of the manufacturing job losses that I believe led to Donald Trump becoming president. 4 million manufacturing jobs were primarily lost in Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, the swing states that Donald Trump needed to win in order to become president. And automation is going to accelerate in the years to come and is going to end up dislocating retail workers, call center workers, truck drivers, fast food workers, and many other labor categories, as well as eventually white-collar professions like accounting and lawyers will be impacted. So this is the greatest story that's not being told in the United States, and we need to get our arms around it very, very quickly.
Now, you said intelligent robots and software are coming for Americans, and our best hope lies in a universal basic income and free health care for all. Why do you think these would solve the problem?
Well, they don't solve the problem, but what they do is they make it less bad and less likely to cause social unrest and problems here in the U.S. So my plan is to pass a value-added tax and then take the gains from that tax and distribute it to the American people in the freedom dividend, which is the universal basic income. On the healthcare side, the American system is highly inefficient, where we spend twice as much as other industrialized countries to lesser results, in large part because the incentives within the healthcare system are not aligned, where healthcare providers are paid on the basis of procedures and activity as opposed to outcomes for patients.
Well, this idea of the universal basic income is quite interesting, but how do you think, how practical this is going to be an affordable and practical idea? Because a lot of countries, a lot of people have this idea, but it never really materializes. Even in Switzerland, where the per capita GDP is considered to be the highest, people have yet to materialize the idea. How do you think this is going to be possible for the United States?
Well, the level I'm setting is $1,000 a month, which is actually eminently affordable. The U.S. economy is vast. It's $19 trillion in size, and the U.S. government is already spending $500 billion on income support and other programs. So for the U.S. is in a unique position. The Swiss example you cite, they actually were suggesting a universal basic income at 3 times the level that I'm suggesting. So the U.S. is in a unique position where we can easily afford it. We're the richest and most advanced society in the world still, in terms of the size of our economy and our ability to distribute those gains.
But what do you think of the idea of beefing up the Social Security system? What's wrong with doing a better job at that front?
Well, the Social Security system kicks in for most Americans at the age of 65, and the average age of, let's say, a truck driver is 49. That's a very, very big gap. So the Social Security system has its own issues in terms of its solvency and needs to be modified in order to stay strong for years to come. But most Americans are going to face issues well before they hit the eligibility age of 65 for Social Security.
What about the idea of really arming people with the skills and the knowledge that is necessary to really survive in the age of AI in the future? What is your plan on doing that, on that front?
Well, as I say in my book that just came out, The War on Normal People, if you look at the data around government-funded retraining programs, they don't work very well. Their success rates have been measured somewhere between 0 and 37%. So it's not realistic, particularly when you look at the affected populations tend to be more in their 40s. The average age of a retail worker is 39. The average age of a truck driver is 49. So trying to reskill people at scale, we're not very good at it. It's not very practical. And in many cases, we're not even going to be attempting that. Like when a mall closes in the middle of the country, it's not like there's going to be a government retraining program for displaced retail workers. The problems are much deeper and broader than that.
Well, you have very interesting ideas, and I guess you have to do a lot of debate and explaining. And you said funding, even for a major proposal like this, isn't that difficult. However, convincing people is difficult. How are you going to convince people to understand and agree with your ideas?
Well, a recent poll indicated that 70% of Americans now believe that technology is going to destroy many more jobs than it creates over the next 10 years. And about half of Americans are already for universal basic income, including a majority of Democrats, which is the party I'm running for the nomination of. So we're already much of the way there, and the support's only going to rise as Americans wake up to what's going on in the economy around them, where this is not like what has gone before. 30% of malls are going to close in the next 4 years. Truck driving is the most common job in 29 states. The issues are coming to a head very fast, and we need to accelerate society forward in order to really rise to the challenges of this era.
Right. However, the support rate for such ideas among the Republicans is considerably lower than in the Democratic Party. How are you going to persuade the Republicans that your idea is the right one?
Well, again, I'm running for the nomination for president as a Democrat, so first I have to win the Democrats over. But I'm very confident that after I become the nominee, there is so much suffering here in the United States where 57% of Americans cannot afford to pay a $500 bill, that the freedom dividend will allow Americans in every region to be able to have more meaningful choices and be able to get their heads up as they start planning for the future. So I'm very confident that as the Democratic nominee, I can make the case to Republicans. Donald Trump got many of the problems right. It's just his solutions are utter nonsense. We have to bring real solutions to the Americans, and there's a real hunger for that.
Mm-hmm. How much do you think your Asian background, your Chinese background, is going to propel or is going to bring down your campaign?
Well, I think that Americans just want someone who's going to help improve their lives, and my race isn't that big of a deal. I mean, I experienced that with Venture for America, where I operated in Michigan, Ohio, Missouri, and other states, and people just want a better life for themselves and their family. And if someone can help them do that, then their race, I don't think, is an issue. On the flip side, there's been such warmth and enthusiasm for my candidacy among the Chinese American community and the Asian American community, so that I've seen real advantages, and I don't think the disadvantages are going to materialize.
Mm-hmm. Besides the idea for future policies, I guess personal charisma and your personal style also matters a lot. How would you describe your personal style, and how much attraction do you think you can have for the average American voters?
You know, I think I'm a practical problem solver. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a business builder. I'm many of the things that Donald Trump pretended to be, honestly, where I don't have any agenda aside from trying to solve problems for this country. I have two young boys who are born here and are going to grow up in America, and I want this country to remain strong and prosperous so that we're proud to call this country our own. And so that's my style. My style is just I want to solve problems, and I bring the facts. I'm a very rational person, which I think actually Americans sort of expect from Chinese Americans.
And how are you going to overcome the challenges such as the huge amount of money necessary to run for president?
Well, you know, there's been such a wave of enthusiasm for my campaign. I get donations every day from South Carolina, Minnesota, North Dakota, places I frankly haven't been. We need to make the case to the American people that universal basic income will improve everyone's lives. And as we make that case, with each passing day, our campaign will grow and will raise additional resources. That's one of the beauties of living in a democratic society, where you have to go out there, make the case, win hearts and minds, and then the money will come.
And how confident are you that one day there will be a President Yang or President Lee someday in the United States?
I'm very confident, because I think the American people are waking up to the challenges around us, and they don't care that much about the identity of their leaders so much as they do their own lives. So I believe there will be a president, hopefully Yang, in the not-so-future. There's something really fundamental about this country where if you have the right ideas and vision and values and competence, you can do anything you want.
Many thanks to my guest tonight, Andrew Yang, the second Chinese American who is running for the office of the U.S. President in the year 2020. And I wish you good luck. And that is it for this edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin. As always, you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle The Point with Alex. Download the application called CGTN to watch the show on your mobile devices, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. Thanks for watching. You've got The Point.